Hello everyone, welcome to another video. And in this video, we are going to talk about chapter 11 from the book Psychology of Money, written by Morgan Housel. And in this chapter, we have the topic of reason and rationale. And we're going to see how they actually, how do we battle between being rational and being reasonable when it comes to our financial strategies or our behavior as well. So we're going to start off with the story of Mr. Julius Wagner. He was a psychiatrist, and he was good at a few things, and one of those things was he was really good at finding patterns and things. And at that time he was trying to treat patients who had like very severe neurosyphilis, and the pattern that he saw in those patients was that the people who were suffering from neurosyphilis, if they had like an added misfortune of a fever as well, then in those cases he saw that people were actually surviving neurosyphilis. So someone who had neurosyphilis and at the same time if they also contracted fever, then there were higher chances that they would survive. So he saw that pattern, and then he decided that he's gonna inject people with different types of viruses that actually cause fever. So he injected people with typhoid, he injected people with malaria and smallpox, and in the earlier studies, most of the people actually, not most of the people, some of the unfortunate people actually died because of the added suffering. But then later he settled on like a milder form of malaria, which induced a fever in the patients that had syphilis. And surprisingly, in those cases, 6 out of 10 people actually recovered from the syphilis. And the reason behind that, or the conclusion that he actually came to, was that fever actually helps people fight infections against different diseases in the body. And later, it was actually tested and verified by science as well, and it is effective to an extent. For example, if you have 1 degree increase in your body temperature, then that increase in temperature actually slows down the replication of the viruses by a factor of 200, by a factor of 200 actually. So a fever is really effective when it comes to slowing down the spread of viruses in your body. Uh, and science actually agrees with that, and even to this day, hospitals around the world, they actually try to educate the parents that if your kids have fever, then it's not something to be really worried about, but it's actually helping the kid in recovering from the ailment they have. uh, but these are the rational or the scientific things that we have figured so far. But if you look at it from the perspective of reason, then in that case, nobody likes to have fever, and the reason is very simple. um, that nobody wants to have fever is that it actually is not very pleasant and it actually hurts you. So that's where science ends and reality takes over, and we actually opt for the more reasonable approach, which is to reduce the fever as soon as possible. So this is where we see um, the rationale and the reason. Basically, we are trying to put ourselves put ourselves in, we sometimes actually lean towards reason more than actually the rationale, right? And this same thing actually applies to our decisions when it comes to money as well. uh, most of the people actually heard about a person named Harry Markowitz. He won a Nobel Prize for his work in for his work in portfolio development and his work on the trade-off between risk and the returns. Um, and then uh, he was actually asked by some journalist, like, how does he actually invest his own money? What is his own investment strategy? And to that he replied that to minimize his future regret, he has actually divided his investments 50-50. So 50% of his money goes to bonds and 50% of money goes to equities. So the point that we're trying to make here is that the man who actually devised the mathematical models for having a great portfolio, he himself actually was not following that model, even though he got a Nobel Prize for that, and uh, and he was actually going against his own research. And the reason that he actually opted to not follow his models 100% was due to the fact that his models were really complex. They were time consuming. They needed a lot of research, a lot of a lot of data that he had to gather to actually come up with a good portfolio. But on the other hand, the 50-50 approach actually kind of like it's simple. It's not as effective as the models, of course, but then he still went for it. Um, and the other reason that he opted to not go for his models all the time uh, is that sometimes you go for more practical approaches, which are kind of like a bit more psychologically comfortable. And that is part of being a human, that we do opt for psychological comfort over complexity, uh, even though if it comes with some added disadvantages, then in some cases we actually go for that as well. So this is another example of 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 reason and rationale. And in this case, as you see, that people still go for more reasonable choices rather than rational choices. And to close this chapter off, we're going to talk about another example. There was a study done in University of Yale University, uh, and they actually came up with a paper where they said that if young investors uh, put their money, or if they put their money if they supercharge their savings for their retirement um, by using a 2-to-1 margin on buying stocks, then they would eventually end up uh, with higher returns by the time they retire, rather than just simply saving their money without any margin. And the margin was 2-to-1. So for every dollar that they invest, they're going to be borrowing $2 from a broker. But the downside to this is, like, if 50%, if the market goes down 50%, then you're actually losing all of your savings. So there is a high possibility that you might wake up one day and then you find that your retirement account is actually empty. So, I mean, the study actually says that if you follow this opportunity, if you follow this strategy, then you're gonna eventually end up, in the long run, you're eventually gonna end up with a lot of money, or a good amount of money while by the time you retire. But if it was you and me, and then one morning if you wake up and see, like, most of our or all of our retirement savings have been wiped out, then it would take a lot of courage for us to keep using the same strategy of 2 to 1 margin, and keeping on investing um, the same way. I would say like most of the people would not opt for that, even though it is rational, the math is correct, but it doesn't actually sound reasonable or looks reasonable. And that's how it is with money as well. In a lot of cases, we as humans opt for more reasonable choices rather than the rational choices. We're going to continue with this chapter in the second video. Hopefully, you learned something in this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.